A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart, Chapter 1. Beneath Crimson Moons. The night had teeth. A sharp wind coursed down the spines of ancient pines, snagging at the shingles of the loneliest cabin on the edge of Silver Grove territory. Inside, Anya pressed her palm against the flaking wood of the windowsill, drawing shallow breaths. The forest whispered secrets she'd never be part of. Not anymore. She was a ghost in the world she once knew. A relic no one wished to remember. She was 20 and had spent most of those years surviving. Survival meant hiding, outlasting the bitter winters, ignoring the ache in her bones, and most of all, forgetting the warmth of a pack's embrace. Her family's legacy had turned her world cold long before disease hollowed her body. A legacy stained by allegations of betrayal. A story twisted by fearful hearts and jealous mouths. She had learned to shrink, to keep her head down, and her presence smaller than rumor, lest the wolves come again and finish what they'd started. Each day was a calculation. Rationed soup, medicinal teas from Botania, the elderly seer who had once overseen Silver Grove's moon rites. Botania visited when she could, braving the scorn of villagers who now whispered that aiding Omegas meant inviting misfortune. Anya knew better than to question Botania's motives. Gratitude had become her lifeline, and pride a luxury she'd long left behind. The wolves would gather soon. Even from her distant perch, Anya could hear their voices. Bold, brash, unyielding. The first full moon after the season's turning always brought a gathering, a reckoning for those who'd erred, a harsh assessment of loyalty and strength. She closed her eyes and remembered other full moons, softer ones, when she had been a child curled up beside her mother, lulled to sleep by lullabies. Before all softness was torn away, a chill rippled through her, and she pulled her faded blanket tighter over her shoulders. The flame in her lantern flickered out. Outside, footsteps crunched over frost-hardened earth, too heavy for Botania. Anya stiffened, refusing to shrink even further, determined not to let fear dictate her last moments. The door creaked open. Botania entered, face pale behind her patterned shawl. "The Alpha King is returning tonight," she whispered. "Stay unseen." Terror and awe mingled in her voice. Anya's story had always been one of absence. The absence of protection, of comfort, of standing among kin. It was absence that defined her life. Each heartbeat a question if anyone would look back, searching for what was lost. The pack hierarchy didn't allow for mercy. Omegas were to be pitied, not helped. Hers was an existence spent in perpetual suspense, waiting for the next calamity. The disease that clung to her stemmed from malice. The night her family was cast out, a healer refused her, sealing her fate as though destiny itself conspired to keep her powerless. Fever became her constant companion, rendering her frail and unfit for work. She coughed into a rag, the bitter taste of blood a reminder that her time was thinning. Botania's potions dulled the worst of it, offering hours of respite before the symptoms returned anew. Anya tried not to remember. Memories were treacherous things. Her father's hand on her shoulder, her mother's laughter, the shimmer of moonlight dancing on wolf pelts. There was a night she was chased through Black Hollow, a pack of young wolves snapping at her heels, their voices soaked in spite. She escaped only because she knew the woods better than they did, her small body slipping through brambles and hollow logs, unseen. Now, she rarely wandered. The woods could be cruel, especially to the sick and marked. Sickness was a stain not easily scrubbed away in Silver Grove, a mark that transformed kindness into avoidance, and once into violence. The laws were clear. Omegas had to earn their place, or fade away. Anya's fate had been declared. A girl tainted by blood and illness, fit only for exile if she lived long enough to be cast out. On the wall, a tapestry depicted the old tribes, alphas draped in glory, betas solemn and sturdy, deltas swift and cunning. There were no omegas woven into the threads, their existence acknowledged only in the stories the old women told, their sacrifices never sung at the moon rites. Botania set a bowl of broth before her. "Eat," she gently urged, but Anya shook her head, appetite lost in the shadow of impending doom. The rumors swirled like crows. The Alpha King, Kalen, undefeated in war, ruthless in judgment, would walk Silver Grove soil again. Some said he'd come to restore order. Others whispered he sought vengeance or a new mate. Anya wondered if he would remember her family, the night it all fell apart, or if her pain would be an afterthought, swept aside by more pressing concerns. Once, Anya had attended a court celebration, distant, unnoticed, but present. She recalled the splendor of the Alpha's hall, the music shimmering in the air, and how children from each house wore threads of silver. She saw herself reflected in a polished shield, her own eyes bright, unknowing what awaited. The disease had not come then. It crept in slowly, after the exile, after the betrayals. There were days she swore she would heal, that the touch of a true healer could mend her, but the council would not allow it. The old healer, under pack law, refused, leaving her to wilt alone. The moon began its ascent, painting the jagged horizon with icy blue. The wild called to Anya, the part of her untouched by cruelty, the part that remembered running free. She pressed fingers to her temples, eyes fluttering. The ache inside her was ancient, growing not just from fever but sorrow. A sorrow that would not be cured by tea or kindness. A knock. Betania looked fearfully at the door, then at Anya and whispered, "Hide." Anya hesitated, then melted into the alcove behind the hearth, heart hammering. Voices outside, rough and angry. Male, unfamiliar. The words blurred, but intent was clear. Searching for something, or someone, but not Betania. They argued, spat curses, and finally retreated, leaving the little house undisturbed but for the trembling stillness inside. Betania left just before midnight, pressing a pouch of herbs into Anya's hands. "You're stronger than you know," she said softly. The words carrying warmth but little hope. Left alone, Anya listened to the silence wrap around her. She tried to recall the taste of honey, the sound of laughter. Old stories her father spun about wolves who survived the greatest droughts by trusting one another. Her family had not been trusted. She had been cast out with them, forced to learn a new kind of survival, the kind that left little for the soul. Around her, the moon's silver gaze grew sharper. Anya's breathing became thin, raspy. Sweat slicked her brow despite the freezing air. She pulled her blanket close, fought the darkness creeping at the edge of her vision. The disease came in waves, crashing through her body, nearly drowning her. Hands clutching the empty bowl, she tried to stand, legs buckling. She would not cry. Not for them, not for the pack, not for herself. She collapsed to the floor as the world spun. Through the tiny window, she glimpsed the first great wolf moving between the trees, a shadow rippling with untold power. Not one of the locals. Something else. Something regal. A predator who ruled with presence alone. Her body refused to rise. The fever locked her in place, leaving her vulnerable, a beacon for wolves and wraiths that haunted Silver Grove's darkest corners. She surrendered to the numbness, trusting that Betania's next visit might bring relief, or that the end would finally arrive. Outside, the wind shifted, signaling that something had changed in the woods. It was not simply the return of an alpha. It was the arrival of consequence, of fate finally catching up, of secrets grown too old to remain buried. Anya drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between yesterday's memories and the raw promise of a night that would reshape not only her destiny, but the fabric of the pack itself. The moon was full. The shadows were waiting, and for the first time in years, the world stood poised on the edge of a story just about to begin. Chapter 2. When Shadows Collide. A bruised dawn spilled through the pines, chilling the breath of Silver Grove. It painted the land in silver and sorrow. A warning, perhaps, or just a reminder that each new day could bruise as deeply as the last. For Anya, consciousness returned in fragments. First, the sound. Boots crushing frost, voices murmuring with tense urgency. Next, the dull ache stretching between her temples, anchoring her to the cold floorboards where she'd collapsed under the weight of sickness and loneliness. Anya tried to move. Pain chained her limbs. Someone shifted her onto a woven mat. Fingers brushed tangled hair from her brow, pausing to check the fever's heat along her cheek. The scent was unfamiliar, wild, feral, layered over the crisp pine and cold hearth ash she'd known her whole life. When she forced her eyes open, she glimpsed a shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, haloed by weak dawn light pouring through the doorway. The room was crowded. Betania stood wringing her hands, her gaze darting between Anya and the newcomer. Behind them lingered 2 members of the Alpha's guard, their postures tense, as if poised to repel attack, even though their only adversary appeared to be a frail Omega, coughing against her own mortality. "Why is she here?" The voice was thunder wrapped in velvet, deep enough to send a tremor through the bones of the little house. That voice belonged only to Kaelin, the Alpha King, commander of Silver Grove's fate. Betania stammered. "She is unwell, my lord. Left with no kin, no one." "Unwell?" Kaelin's gaze raked over Anya, clinical and cold. But something snagged. Some ancient recognition, too quick to name. "And yet you harbor her in my woods. She poses no threat. She's not strong enough." Betania spoke quickly, protecting and deflecting at once. "She's not dangerous to you or your council." Anya's voice cracked, surprising all, her defiance slipping through despite the fever's grip. "Just leave me. I'll be gone soon enough." The guards glanced at each other, uncomfortable. Omegas did not speak so boldly, especially not when confronted by the Alpha King himself. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. The old ways tolerated no weakness, but something in Anya's manner, her refusal to shrink, even when defeated, pricked his curiosity. "It is not your place to decide what becomes of you." Kaelin's words cut with crisp authority. "You are confessed to my protection while on my land." The pronouncement left no room for dissent, though his stare lingered on her as if searching for the answer to a question he could not voice. Betania, ever shrewd, supplied, "She is the sole survivor of the House of Varys. If you—" "The traitor's bloodline," spat one guard, spittle flecking his rough beard. Anya lifted her head, every word a struggle. "My family died because the council made them outcasts. I am no one's threat. I just want to live in peace until—" She left the sentence unfinished. The end was always the same. Kaelin surveyed her as if puzzling out a prophecy. Everything about her was wrong. Her pallor, her faint wolf scent soured by illness, her eyes that held none of the slyness he expected from survivors. Yet somewhere within them, something flickered. A defiant ember. "Pack law forbids leaving her to die unclaimed on pack land," Betania said. "If she cannot defend herself, it is your duty." "Enough." Kaelin's patience cracked, but not from anger. Something else, a chink of doubt sliding into his certainty. He turned on his heel, gesturing to the guards. "Bring her to the keep. Place her under watch. No one else is to interfere," he barked. "If any speak against it, they answer to me." Betania's relief was tangible, as was her fear. "Please, she's not strong enough for—" Anya attempted to protest, but a coughing fit silenced her, bile burning her throat. The guards, accustomed to war not caretaking, lifted her easily and carried her out. The world outside stabbed her skin with needles of chill. She glimpsed the dotting of wolves standing sentinel at the edge of morning, curiosity and suspicion mingling in their postures. At the heart of Silvergrove, the Alpha's keep loomed, a structure of stone and wood, ancient enough to remember other wars and other kings. Here, the rules were carved into marrow. Anya was installed in a small sunless chamber near the infirmary, locked from the outside, for her protection. She was not alone. Through the thin walls, sounds filtered in. An injured wolf pup whining softly, the mutter of healers, a drip of water from a leaking roof. She listened, disoriented, waiting for outrage or interrogation, but none came. Afternoon waned. The fever receded just enough for Anya to sit upright. She surveyed the Spartan room, a narrow bed, a chipped basin, a battered chair set too far from the window. Sunlight crept across the floor like a hopeful wish denied. Once, she'd dreamt of places like this. A real bed, warmth, even simple food. Now, it felt like another kind of exile. In the corridor, voices rose and fell. Her name became a curse, a fragment of old gossip. "Omega filth," someone sneered. then silence as Boots retreated. Kaelin entered just before dusk, a wolf at the threshold, both invitation and threat. He regarded her, eyes sharp, posture effortlessly dominant. She sat straighter in her bed, refusing to cower. "They say you're cursed," he observed, neither cruel nor kind. "They say a lot of things." Anya drew up dignity like a second skin. "They never say why it's easier to believe the worst." Kaelin folded his arms. "Will defiance cure your illness?" She managed a bitter smile. "It's kept me alive this long." He studied her, unsure what to make of the answer. In the flicker of torchlight, she looked both fragile and indomitable. A contradiction he couldn't dismiss. "Eat, rest." He thrust a loaf of bread toward her. "You're under my protection. For now." Anya took the food but met his gaze. "Your protection may cost more than my life is worth." He stepped closer, the air shifting, charged. "I decide what things are worth," he said. For just a second, something sparked in the space between them. Recognition, or maybe the first breath of destiny. He turned, cloak flaring as he left. The guards resumed their silent posts. The door closed, not with a slam, but with the cool finality of a judgment passed. Alone, Anya ate. The bread was coarse, but more than she'd tasted in weeks. Gradually, the tension ebbed from her shoulders. She wondered why the Alpha King of all people had intervened. Was it happenstance, or a commandment of old laws written in blood and moonlight? Was it compassion, or suspicion? Night deepened, bringing with it quiet terror, fear that she had only exchanged one cage for another, yet within her blossomed something stubborn. She had faced the Alpha King and not flinched. She still owned herself, however little the world allowed. Later, as exhaustion claimed her, Anya drifted between fever dreams and memories of running through sunlit forests, faster and freer than she had been for years. She awoke at midnight, to the hoarse howls of wolves courting the moon, a chorus echoing with hunger, longing, and warnings. The king's scent lingered in the hall. Anya pressed her fingers to her throat, feeling its steady thrum. No matter what the power structure decreed, she would not disappear quietly. The forest would remember her resistance. And in the deepest part of the night, with frost ghosting the window, Anya realized the Alpha King had not looked at her with revulsion. There was something else there. Something yet unnamed, dangerous in its possibility. The new day would bring more questions, challenges, and perhaps a fate utterly unlike the life she had been forced to live. Chapter 3. Unspoken Threads. The pale morning lit the narrow window, its glow unable to banish the haze that clung to Anya's mind. The sick room at the Alpha's keep was no sanctuary, but for the first time in months, her body felt less like a cage. A thin broth rested at her bedside, and from beyond the door, she heard the muffled rhythm of life. Footsteps, voices, the impatient whimper of a wolf pup nursing an injured leg. Days slipped past with a strange rhythm. Healers visited and withdrew, worried but distant. Few looked her in the eye for long. The pack's disdain had not faded. Whispers still filtered through the stone, branding her with the past she could not escape. Rumors stitched her shadow to old betrayal. Omega, the cursed one. Varus blood. She learned to endure, answering only when necessary, never offering more than facts or courtesy. What puzzled Anya most was the presence of the Alpha King. Kaelin did not hover. He appeared just often enough to be felt. His silent authority reverberated in the stone and air. He checked the guards each day, delivered orders, demanded updates, yet rarely spoke to her directly. Still, she sensed him, a force orbiting her quiet suffering. His distance was not neglect. When necessary, he intervened. On her fourth evening, Anya overheard a heated argument. Two betas, bitter that an Omega exile occupied the healer's time. Their complaints grew loud enough to draw Kaelin's attention. He silenced them with a glance, his command brooking no appeal. Afterward, neither dared look her way again. Despite illness, Anya found small purpose. One dawn, she heard a young wolf pup keening behind the wall. Driven by empathy and the restless urge to help, she left her bed, arms trembling, fever lurking at her joints. She found the pup alone, legs splinted but still whimpering. With gentle fingers, she stroked its fur, humming the old lullaby her mother had sung so long ago. When the healers returned, they were startled to discover the pup peaceful, breathing steadily for the first time in days. Word spread, along with cautious respect. None spoke their thanks aloud, but Anya noticed the subtle shifts. Healers brought her fresher bread, and the guards' eyes softened briefly as they passed. Later that week, Kaelin arrived at her door with a single question. "You calmed the pup." "How?" His tone was measured, not unkind. It only needed kindness. Most things do. Anya avoided his gaze, unconsciously bracing for judgment. He studied her for a moment. "Wolf pups fear most adults, but not you." "My family bred healers before." She hesitated. "Before exile. I think I remember how to comfort them." Silence lingered. Then, unexpectedly, Kaelin admitted, "I was not raised with kin. The council kept my family distant from pack affairs. Strength creates enemies." The admission flickered at the edge of vulnerability. A breach in the armor. Anya wondered what pains he carried behind the title and strict command. Would she ever know? The strange rapport grew in increments. She became strong enough to take short walks inside the keep. Always watched, always wary. During one such walk, she found Kaelin in the training yard, sparring with a loyal beta. His movements were sharp, efficient, but she detected the hint of stiffness in his left arm. A wound, perhaps, or some cautious restraint. He caught her watching and paused mid-motion. Their eyes met. Instead of cold dismissal, Kaelin offered a nod. A gesture of inclusion, rare and quietly significant. As days continued, Anya listened more closely. The pack was restless. The council wanted answers from the king. Rivals circled the edges of Silver Grove, whispering about weakness, about threats from within. Some angered that Kaelin spent resources on a dying Omega. Others, more loyal, trusted his judgment, but feared what it meant for tradition. Politicking was not her world, but it was unavoidable. She heard plans for council meetings, the murmur of power struggles. Sometimes, late at night, Kaelin came to sit at her bedside. He never asked for much, only her opinion on something small, a change in protocol, the names of plants Betania used in her teas. Each conversation was a thin bridge across decades of hierarchy. One night, a storm pressed against the keep, thunder shaking the old stone. Anya lay awake, unable to sleep for the aches in her legs. Kaelin arrived in silence and sat at the foot of her bed, weary, hands curled into loose fists. "They challenged my right to bring you here today," he said quietly. "They ask why I would expend my authority for an exile." She shifted, lips pulling into a tired smile. "Did you have an answer?" He met her gaze. "Because sometimes mercy surprises me, or perhaps it frightens me more than war does." It was more than admission. It was a confession of the life he had led, one built on force, yet haunted by a hunger for something softer. Thunder echoed, and Anya closed her eyes, listening. For the first time, loneliness seemed a shade lighter. The room was crowded with unspoken words, possibilities, and the hum of two souls whose paths had crossed in the storm. The days that followed were marked by a gradual easing of the fever. Betania visited with stronger tea. Healers checked her temperature, noting improvement. Each small comfort felt hard-won. In the courtyard, Anya watched young betas train, practicing forms handed down for generations. Wolves shifted, howled, raced. And she remembered her own shifting, years before, how she'd run through moonlit fields, part of the world, not apart from it. Kaelin approached her as she traced her old running tracks with her eyes. "You ache to run," he murmured, not unkind. "I ache to belong," she replied, voice barely louder than the wind. He looked away, as if the words had touched something raw within him. That evening, as she returned to her room, she paused in the corridor. From an open window, she saw the forest, vast, restless, untamable. She drew a slow breath. Change always arrived first on the wind, long before the pack realized it. Before sleep claimed her, Anya considered the strange luck that had landed her amid Silver Grove's intrigue. If fate had kept her breathing for this meeting, for this reluctant, gentle alliance, Perhaps all suffering had not been in vain. She drifted off, cradled by echoes of thunder and the certainty that someone, somewhere, was beginning to see her, not as a curse, but as a possibility. Chapter 4. Fractures and Longing. The thick fog of early spring pressed against the stone walls of Silver Grove's keep, softening harsh edges but failing to mute the tension coiling through every corridor. In its heart, Anya rose from her narrow bed, strength returning by increments she counted in deep breaths and tentative strides. The fever's grip had loosened since the storm, her head clearer, her limbs steadier, yet uncertainty gathered in the shadows behind her steps, because each day the pack grew more watchful, suspicion sharpening in the corners where old secrets lingered. The council's senior betas whispered in alcoves, voices carrying rumors of war, betrayal, and the shame carried by any sign of weakness near their alpha king. Anya's presence disrupted tradition. She became a symbol, invoked in arguments and cautions, eyed as both warning and possibility. Her daily walks through the keep were monitored, every glance measuring her worth and intent. She ignored most of it, focusing instead on small duties, helping a healer sort roots, gathering linens with trembling hands, coaxing frightened pups to sleep. In those moments, Anya felt a splinter of belonging. A place, however humble, among wolves still learning to see her as more than history's wound. Kalen's appearances multiplied, though he remained careful, neither pressing nor recoiling. When he arrived at the healer's chamber one afternoon, Anya looked up from her work, scanning his face for the mood she had begun to decipher. A tightening at his jaw, a furrow between his brows. She had come to understand that the Alpha King's burdens ran deeper than protocol. His worries braided together loyalty and fear, ambition and regret. "The council grows impatient," he said, voice low. "They believe my judgment compromised." Anya met his gaze, unflinching. "Perhaps they misunderstand mercy. Our world was not built on mercy," Kalen replied, but something in his tone betrayed hope. In the keep, alliances shifted, old wounds reopened. A delta named Orin, a wolf lean as winter, began spreading rumors, claiming that Anya's presence had triggered recent unrest. Whispered accusations reached the council. The pack had lost its edge. The Alpha King had grown sentimental. Silver Grove needed to return to severity. Anya's status hung on a thread, each week dissolving her safety at the whim of political tide. That same night, council members assembled in the Great Hall. Silver candlelight flickered against the walls as anxious voices built clashing arguments. Kalen presided, his posture rigid, but his eyes scanning for threat. Anya sat at the edge, her hands folded in her lap, defiance and insecurity warring. She listened as Orin declared, "The Omega's fate must be settled. Her continued presence is a distraction. Mercy leads to weakness." Murmurs traveled, swelling until the hall seemed ready to collapse. Kalen's words, crisp and unwavering, ended the uproar. "The council entrusts me with wisdom. I see what you do not." For a moment, silence worked its way through the crowd. A rare quiet in a room otherwise ruled by sound and fury. The days that followed were marked by growing proximity. Kalen found reasons to linger near the healer's suite, sometimes sharing a spare meal, sometimes a fragment of memory from wars long past. In clipped phrases, he revealed glimpses of duty and sorrow, a younger brother lost, the ache of command, the cost of choices pressed upon him since youth. One night, he confided, "Power means isolation. Few understand the price." Anya listened, heart breaking for the man veiled behind title. She wondered if anyone had ever sat so closely with him, letting silence serve as comfort. The keep, usually so austere, swelled with tension that was not just political, but deeply personal. A war between duty and desire, custom and care. One dawn, an attack rattled Silver Grove. A rival pack, hungry for dominance, breached the outer gate. Alarms clanged. Wolves raced to defend the territory. Cries rang through stone passageways as claws met steel. In the chaos, Kalen burst into the healer's room. "With me," he commanded. Anya obeyed, fear knotting her chest. He led her through twisting corridors into a hidden guard room, cold and alive with the scent of iron. The sounds of battle reverberated. Kaelin pressed close, his warmth a shield against the terror haunting her breath. "They seek spectacle," he murmured. "They believe shifter strength proven through public humiliation." The violence subsided as quickly as it had flared. Beta soldiers repelled the invaders, though wounds marked the keep's defenders. Returning to her chamber, Anya found herself trembling, not just from fear, but from the closeness that the battle had forged. As dusk bled over the woods, she and Kaelin sat together, hands nearly touching. He studied her profile, uncertainty flickering in storm-gray eyes. Anya, drawn by a longing she dared not voice, turned slightly, catching the shadow of regret in his features. "Does this kindness end when the threat passes?" she asked, her voice tremulous. His answer came slowly, each word like a stone laid on old ground. "You challenge my instinct. You force me to remember gentler ways. I am not certain what follows such remembering." Between them, a charge grew, like static before a storm, an ache in the air that demanded presence. It was not lust, not yet. It lived in longing, the kind that finds home in forbidden glances, in the gentle brush of a hand upon a fevered brow. The moment nearly fractured the shield between them. Kaelin leaned closer. Anya felt the heat of him, the hunger, the deeply rooted restraint. One desperate for release, the other terrified of surrender. Their lips hovered inches apart, breath mingling. Then, the hurried footsteps of a healer snapped the spell. Anya pulled away, cheeks aflame, hope and disappointment commingling in her chest. The rest of the night passed in restless silence. That fleeting intimacy haunted her, the sweetness of almost, a promise neither would admit, yet neither could silence. By morning, the council reconvened, declaring that Anya would be sent away after her recovery. The arguing voices justified exile by warning of new dangers, tradition, and luck. The old superstitions still wielded as weapons. Anya felt the old despair return, heavier now for the connection she'd begun to feel. Kaelin did not contest the council then. He simply met her eyes with a look that said everything. He fought for her, but even Alpha Kings had limits in a world ruled by fear and blood. In her chamber, Anya packed her meager belongings, anger and sorrow warring with traces of hope. The keep now felt too large, each corridor echoing loss. Yet beneath it all, she carried a certainty, the kind born from pain and survival. She would not yield. She would not fade away quietly, not now, not after discovering a part of herself that refused to let fate dictate her worth. Night settled over Silvergrove. Somewhere beyond the keep, wolves ran through the woods, chasing the moon and all its secrets. At her window, Anya watched them, longing for freedom, belonging, and the courage to claim her own destiny. Chapter 5. Blood and Betrayal. The courtyard erupted into chaos as Elder Mordecai's warriors advanced. Torchlight flickered across drawn blades and snarling faces, casting dancing shadows on ancient stone. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the keep's wall, watching the confrontation unfold with growing horror. Kaelin stood between her and the approaching threat, his presence radiating deadly authority. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his alpha power. "I will not warn you again." "You have been compromised, my lord," Mordecai replied, his tone respectful but unyielding. "This Omega has clouded your judgment with dark magic. We act to save you from her influence." "Dark magic?" Kaelin's laugh was sharp as winter wind. "She can barely stand without aid. What magic could she possibly wield?" "The magic of corruption," spat Counselor Draven, stepping forward with his hand on his sword hilt. "Look how she has changed you. Once you ruled with iron will. Now you coddle weakness, shelter the cursed bloodline that betrayed our ancestors." Anya felt the familiar sting of those accusations, but something else stirred within her, a heat that had nothing to do with fever. The sparrow she'd healed earlier that day suddenly burst into song from its perch in the garden, its voice impossibly clear and strong. Other wounded creatures around the keep began to stir. An injured wolf pup limped into the courtyard, its splinted leg moving without pain. A falcon with a broken wing took flight, circling overhead with perfect grace. The assembled wolves fell silent, staring at this impossible display. Mordecai's face went pale as understanding dawned. "Healer's blood," he whispered. "She carries the old gift." Kaelin turned to look at Anya, his expression a mixture of wonder and dawning comprehension. "That's how you calm the pup. That's why you're recovering so quickly now." His voice held awe. "You're not just any Omega. You're a natural healer." "Impossible," Dravon snarled. "The healing bloodlines died out generations ago. This is some trick, some deception meant to make us lower our guard." But even as he spoke, the evidence surrounded them. Every wounded creature within the keep's walls had begun to mend, drawn by proximity to Anya's awakening power. The gift that had lain dormant through years of illness and suppression was finally emerging, called forth by desperate need and the presence of her true mate. "The Varys line," Mordecai breathed, pieces of old knowledge clicking into place. "They weren't traitors. They were the last of the healer clans. We exiled the very bloodline that could have saved us all." The revelation hit the assembled wolves like a physical blow. The family they had cast out in shame, the bloodline they had branded as cursed, had carried within them the rarest and most precious gift known to their kind. And they had let it wither in exile, nearly lost forever. "You see?" Kaelin's voice carried triumph and rage in equal measure. "Your ignorance and prejudice nearly cost us everything. She is not our enemy. She may be our salvation." But Mordecai's expression hardened rather than softened. "All the more reason she cannot remain," he declared. "A power like that cannot be allowed to run free, uncontrolled. She must be brought before the High Council, studied, her abilities properly channeled for the good of all packs." "You would cage her," Kaelin realized, his own power beginning to manifest as his eyes shifted to wolf gold. "Turn her into a tool for your ambitions." "I would preserve a precious resource," Mordecai countered, "as any wise leader would do." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Around them, pack members began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some looked at Anya with new reverence, others with fear of the unknown. The political calculus was shifting in real time, alliances reforming based on this new revelation. That's when the attack came. The first arrow whistled out of the darkness beyond the keep's walls, followed by a chorus of howls that chilled the blood. Northern raiders, wolves from the rival Shadowfang pack, poured through breached defenses like a black tide. They had chosen this moment of internal division to strike, when Silvergrove's forces were scattered and their leaders distracted. "Defend the keep!" Kaelin roared. But even as he shouted orders, Anya could see the tactical nightmare unfolding. Half his warriors were arrayed against each other in the courtyard, weapons already drawn in factional dispute. They couldn't unite quickly enough to repel a coordinated assault. The battle exploded across the courtyard in waves of violence. Steel rang against steel as wolves in human form clashed, while others shifted mid-combat, their howls of rage echoing off stone walls. Anya pressed herself deeper into the shadows, watching in horror as blood began to stain the ancient stones. Kaelin fought like the apex predator he was, his blade dancing through enemy ranks with lethal precision. But Anya could see the strain in his movements, the way he favored his left side. The old wound she'd noticed during training was hampering him, making each parry a fraction slower than it should be. Through the chaos, she spotted Mordecai and his loyalists retreating toward the keep's inner sanctum. They weren't fleeing. They were regrouping, using the attack as cover to consolidate their position. This raid wasn't just an external threat. It was the catalyst for civil war. "Take the healer," someone shouted. Whether from Mordecai's faction or the raiders, Anya couldn't tell. Suddenly, she was the prize both sides sought to claim, a living weapon worth any price in blood. She ran, her newfound strength carrying her through corridors she'd memorized during weeks of recovery. Behind her, pursuit echoed. Boots on stone, harsh breathing, the scrape of weapons against walls. They were hunting her, and she had nowhere left to hide. The great hall's doors loomed ahead, but as she reached them, a figure stepped from the shadows. Elder Dravon blocked her path, his sword gleaming in the torchlight. "Did you think we hadn't planned for this?" he sneered. "The raid provides perfect cover. You'll disappear in the confusion, taken by raiders who will conveniently deliver you to our allies in the High Council. Kaelin will come for me, Anya said, backing away from the advancing blade. The Alpha King has more pressing concerns, Draven replied. By dawn, he'll be dead or deposed. Either way, his protection ends tonight. The words hit Anya like a physical blow. This wasn't just opportunism. It was assassination. While she had been the visible target, the real goal was to eliminate Kaelin and install a more malleable leader. Her relationship with him had provided the perfect excuse for rebellion. Rage flared within her, hot and pure. These wolves had destroyed her family, exiled her to suffer and die, and now they meant to kill the one person who had shown her kindness. The healing power she'd only just discovered suddenly inverted, becoming something darker and more terrible. No, she whispered, and the word carried power that made Draven stumble backward. You've taken enough. The change that overcame her was like nothing she'd ever experienced. The gentle warmth of healing became searing fire. Every wounded creature her power had touched suddenly screamed in harmony. Not with pain, but with shared fury. The sparrow's song became a shriek of rage. The wolf pup's whimper turned to a howl of vengeance. Draven's sword fell from nerveless fingers as Anya's power washed over him. But this wasn't the gentle touch that mended broken bones. This was the flip side of healing, the ability to unmake what had been made whole. His body began to fail as his own life force was drawn away, pulled into the vortex of her unleashed gift. Please, he gasped, falling to his knees. I was only following orders, but Anya was beyond hearing. The power flowing through her was intoxicating, addictive. For the first time in her life, she held the strength to strike back at those who had wronged her. Every year of suffering, every night of loneliness, every moment of degradation fueled the dark fire burning in her veins. Through the chaos, Kaelin's roar of pain cut through her rage like a blade. Her concentration shattered as she realized what she was doing, what she was becoming. The power recoiled, leaving her gasping and weak, while Draven collapsed unconscious but alive. She stumbled toward the sounds of battle, knowing with terrible certainty that while she had been discovering the darker aspects of her gift, the man she loved was fighting for his life against impossible odds. The keep was falling. The Alpha King was wounded and outnumbered, and Anya carried in her blood both the power to heal and the ability to destroy everything she touched. The night was far from over, and its darkest hour was yet to come. Chapter 6. The Price of Power. The Great Hall had become a battlefield painted in blood and moonlight. Anya stumbled through the carnage, her legs shaking from the aftershock of unleashing power she barely understood. Bodies littered the ancient stones, some moving, some terrifyingly still. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air as tapestries caught fire from overturned torches. At the hall's center, Kaelin fought with the desperate fury of a cornered wolf. 3 Shadowfang raiders circled him like predators, their coordinated attacks forcing him back toward the throne dais. His left arm hung useless at his side, blood seeping through torn fabric. Each parry came slower than the last, his strength ebbing with every heartbeat. Behind the raiders, Elder Mordecai watched with cold satisfaction. "Yield, my lord," he called out over the clash of steel. "Accept the inevitable. Your reign ends tonight, but your life needn't." "I'll die before I bow to you," Kaelin snarled, his blade sweeping in a desperate arc that barely kept his attackers at bay. Anya's heart clenched as she witnessed his struggle. The proud Alpha King who had shown her such gentle kindness was being torn apart by wolves who should have died protecting him. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. These were his own people, sworn to loyalty, now turned against him for political gain. She tried to summon her power again, to heal his wounds from across the hall, but the energy wouldn't come. The dark manifestation had drained her reserves, leaving her as weak as she'd been during the worst days of her illness. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed behind an overturned table, watching helplessly as the man she loved fought alone. "Enough," Mordecai declared, stepping forward with a crossbow in his hands. "I grow tired of this display." The bolt took Kaelin in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his sword clattering across the stones. He fell to one knee, crimson spreading across his chest as the raiders closed in for the kill. No! Anya's scream tore from her throat with primal desperation. She couldn't reach him, couldn't heal him, couldn't even stand, but she wouldn't let him die alone. The sound of her voice made Kaelin turn, their eyes meeting across the blood-stained hall. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition deeper than words, older than the pack bonds that governed their world. She saw him mouth a single word, run. Instead, she crawled toward him, dragging herself across broken stone and spilled blood. If they were going to die, it would be together. How touching, Mordecai observed, his voice dripping with disdain. The traitor's daughter crawls to her master's side. Perhaps we should kill you both together. A poetic end to this unfortunate chapter. But before the raiders could deliver the killing blow, new howls echoed from the courtyard. Not the harsh cries of Shadowfang wolves, but something else. Something that made even the hardened warriors pause and look toward the doors with uncertainty. The massive oak doors exploded inward, and through them poured a sight that defied belief. Betania stood at the threshold, but she was no longer the frail elderly woman who had tended Anya's sickness. Power radiated from her small frame like heat from a forge, and her eyes burned with silver fire. "You fools," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Behind her came wolves, not raiders or rebels, but the pack's true guardians. Warriors who had remained loyal. Healers who understood what Anya represented. Elders who remembered the old stories. They moved with purpose, surrounding the usurpers with practiced efficiency. "Betania," Mordecai breathed, his face going pale. "But you're just what? A withered old woman who makes tea?" Betania stepped into the hall, and with each footfall, her presence grew more commanding. "I am the last of the Moon Whisper line, keeper of the ancient ways, and you have committed sacrilege in my sight." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled wolves. The Moon Whispers had been the high priestesses of their people, the bridge between the mortal pack and the lunar powers that governed their transformations. They had vanished centuries ago, their bloodline thought extinct. "The healer girl is under my protection," Betania continued, her gaze fixing on Anya with unexpected tenderness. "She carries the blood of my sister's line, the gift that was nearly lost to your ignorance and fear." Anya stared in wonder as pieces of her fractured history began to fall into place. Betania had never been just a kind stranger offering aid. She had been family, a guardian watching over the last heir of a sacred bloodline. "It changes nothing," Mordecai said, though his voice shook with uncertainty. "The girl is dangerous, uncontrolled. She nearly killed Draven with dark magic. She defended herself with power she doesn't understand," Betania corrected, "because no one bothered to teach her, to guide her, to help her master what flows in her veins." Her silver gaze swept the hall, taking in the carnage and betrayal. "You drove out her family when you should have honored them. You let her sicken and suffer when you should have cherished her. And now you dare judge her for using the only weapon you left her?" The loyal wolves advanced, and the Shadowfang raiders found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Some threw down their weapons, others fought with desperate fury until they were overwhelmed. The tide of battle turned as swiftly as it had begun, but Anya's attention remained fixed on Kaelin, who lay bleeding on the cold stone. She reached him finally, her hands fluttering over his wounds with helpless urgency. The crossbow bolt protruded from his shoulder, and his breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. "I can't," she whispered, pressing her palms against his chest. "I can't heal you. The power, it's gone." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with surprising strength. "Then we'll face whatever comes together," he said softly. "No." Betania's voice cut through their desperate whispers. The ancient priestess knelt beside them, her weathered hands glowing with silver light. "You can heal him, child, but it will require a sacrifice. Anything," Anya said without hesitation. Betania's expression grew grave. "The healing you carry is tied to life force itself. You can save him, but it will cost you years of your own existence. You will age, weaken, perhaps not survive the transfer. Are you willing to pay that price? Anya looked down at Kaelin, seeing the love and anguish in his golden eyes. He tried to speak, to protest, but she placed a finger against his lips. I've been dying slowly for years, she said simply. At least this way, my death will have meaning. Anya, no. Kaelin tried to push her hands away, but he was too weak to resist. She leaned down and kissed him gently, tasting salt and copper and desperate love. You saved me when I had nothing left, she whispered against his lips. Let me save you in return. Before he could protest further, she placed her hands over his heart and opened herself to the deepest current of her power. Not the gentle healing she'd used on wounded creatures, nor the dark inversion that had nearly consumed Dravon. This was the pure essence of life itself, the force that bound soul to flesh. Power flowed from her in a torrent that left her gasping and shaking. She felt years peeling away from her existence like leaves in an autumn wind, her life force pouring into Kaelin's broken body. His wounds began to close, the crossbow bolt dissolving into silver mist, his breathing growing strong and steady. But with each heartbeat he grew stronger, she grew weaker. Her hair began to silver at the temples, fine lines appearing around her eyes. The price of healing an Alpha King was steep indeed. Stop, Kaelin begged, now strong enough to grasp her wrists. Stop, before you kill yourself. But Anya couldn't stop, wouldn't stop until she was certain he would live. The power had its own momentum now, drawing from the deepest wells of her essence. She was dimly aware of Betania chanting in the old language, trying to moderate the flow, to keep her from giving too much. When the healing finally ended, Anya collapsed across Kaelin's chest, aged but alive. She looked up at him through eyes that now held the weight of years she had never lived, and saw wonder and grief warring in his expression. Why? He whispered. Because, she said, her voice carrying a new depth of wisdom and weariness. Love is supposed to be stronger than fear. Chapter 7. Bonds of Fire and Moon. The great hall fell into sacred silence, as Anya's sacrifice rippled through the assembled wolves like stones cast into still water. Those who had witnessed the healing felt something fundamental shift in their understanding of power, of loyalty, of what it truly meant to serve something greater than oneself. The silver light fading from her hands left an afterimage burned into their memories, a vision of love transcending the rigid hierarchies that had governed their lives. Kaelin sat up slowly, his body whole, but his spirit shattered by what Anya had given up for him. She looked older now, not dramatically aged, but carrying the weight of years she had sacrificed. Her dark hair held threads of silver, and her eyes reflected depths of experience that spoke of wisdom bought with suffering. You beautiful, impossible woman, he murmured, gathering her into his arms, despite the protests of muscles still remembering recent wounds. What have you done? What needed to be done? She replied simply, though her voice carried new resonance, the authority of one who had touched the very essence of life and death. What I chose to do. Around them, the aftermath of betrayal was being sorted with swift efficiency. Betania directed the loyal wolves in securing the conspirators, her ancient authority brooking no argument from even the most senior warriors. Elder Mordecai knelt with his hands bound, his face a mask of frustrated ambition brought low by forces he had never understood. The old ways are not dead, Betania announced to the gathered pack, her voice carrying to every corner of the blood-stained hall. The healing bloodlines were not lost. They were preserved, protected, waiting for the moment when our people would need them most. She gestured to Anya, who still rested in Kaelin's protective embrace. This woman carries the purest gift of our ancestors, the power to heal not just bodies, but the very soul of our pack. She has proven her worth beyond question, paid prices none of us would dare contemplate. She's dangerous, Mordecai spat, unable to remain silent even in defeat. That power could destroy us all if it turns dark again. Power is only as dangerous as the heart that wields it, Betania replied calmly. And I have seen her heart. It chose love over vengeance, sacrifice over safety, healing over harm. Can you say the same, Elder Mordecai? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Around the hall, pack members looked at their former leader with new eyes, seeing him not as a protector of tradition, but as a man who had nearly destroyed the very thing he claimed to defend. Kalen struggled to his feet, pulling Anya up with him. His voice, when he spoke, carried the full authority of his position, not just as Alpha King, but as one who had been redeemed by another's sacrifice. "Let it be known throughout Silvergrove and beyond," he declared, his words ringing off ancient stone. "This woman, Anya of the Varys line, has saved not just my life but the future of our pack. She will be honored as she deserves, protected as she has protected us." "And what form will that protection take?" asked Captain Torvin, one of the few council members who had remained neutral throughout the crisis. Kalen looked down at Anya, seeing in her aged features the same courage and compassion that had first drawn him to her. "She will be my mate," he said simply, "my equal in all things, sharing the burden of leadership and the privileges of power." Gasps echoed through the hall. A mating between an Alpha King and an Omega was unprecedented, a violation of every social norm their society had built. But as the initial shock faded, something else emerged, a sense of rightness, of destiny finally being fulfilled. "The claiming ritual," Betania said, her voice carrying ancient authority. "It must be done properly, with the full moon as witness. Only then will the bond be truly recognized by pack law." Through the shattered windows, moonlight streamed silver and pure, painting everything it touched with otherworldly beauty. The full moon hung at its zenith, perfect and commanding, as if the lunar goddess herself had orchestrated events to reach this moment. "Here," Anya said suddenly, her voice carrying unexpected strength. "Let it be done here, now, with our pack as witness. Let no one say our bond was made in secret or shame." Kalen studied her face, seeing the determination that no amount of aging could diminish. "Are you certain? The ritual is intense, given what you've already sacrificed." "I'm certain." She turned to face the assembled wolves, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. "I've spent my life being told I wasn't worthy, wasn't strong enough, wasn't good enough to belong. I won't let fear rob me of this moment." Betania stepped forward, producing from her robes a ceremonial blade that gleamed with more than reflected moonlight. "Then let the ancient words be spoken, the old promises made. What the goddess joins, let no mortal separate." The ritual that followed was like nothing the pack had ever witnessed. Not the formal political ceremony typically reserved for alpha matings, but something primal and sacred. A return to the oldest traditions of their people. Betania guided them through words spoken in the ancient tongue, oaths that bound not just two individuals, but two destinies. When Kalen drew the ceremonial blade across his palm, his blood fell onto the moonlit stones like liquid fire. Anya followed suit, her own cut deeper than necessary. A reminder that she held nothing back, gave everything she had to offer. Their hands joined, blood mingling, and power flowed between them like an electric current. But this was different from the healing she had performed earlier. This was completion. Two halves of a whole finally united. The bond that formed between them was visible to every wolf present, a silver cord of light that pulsed with their shared heartbeat. "By blood and moon, by choice and sacrifice," Betania intoned, "I declare this mating sealed. Let all who witness remember that love conquers all boundaries, transcends all laws, transforms all hearts." The transformation in Anya was immediate and dramatic. The mating bond didn't just connect her to Kalen, it unlocked potential that had been suppressed by years of abuse and neglect. Her healing gift, temporarily depleted by her sacrifice, surged back stronger than ever. But more than that, she felt the awakening of her true wolf form, the shifting ability that illness and malnutrition had kept dormant. Light exploded around her as she shifted for the first time in years. Her wolf was magnificent, silver and white like moonlight on snow, larger than any Omega had a right to be. She was beautiful, powerful, and utterly transformed from the broken girl who had nearly died alone in a forgotten cabin. The pack fell to their knees as one, recognizing what stood before them. Not just their alpha's mate, but a Luna in the truest sense. A queen worthy of their loyalty and devotion. Kalen shifted as well, his massive dark wolf moving to stand beside her silver form. Together they howled, their voices joining in perfect harmony, and every wolf in Silvergrove answered the call. The sound echoed across the territory and beyond, carrying news of the new era that had just begun. When they shifted back to human form, both were changed. Kaelin stood taller, his presence more commanding than ever. But it was Anya's transformation that truly awed the assembled pack. She no longer looked aged or weary. The mating bond had restored what her sacrifice had taken, leaving her stronger and more beautiful than ever. "Rise," she commanded, her voice carrying new authority. "Rise and know that this pack has a future built not on fear and tradition alone, but on love and justice and the courage to change." They rose as one, and in their eyes was something that had been missing for too long: hope. Elder Mordecai and his conspirators were led away to face judgment. Their rebellion ended not by violence, but by the undeniable truth of what they had witnessed. The Shadowfang raiders who had survived the battle begged for mercy, understanding that they had chosen the wrong side in a conflict between the past and the future. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in shades of gold and rose, Kaelin and Anya stood together at the Great Hall's entrance. Their pack gathered around them, no longer divided by politics or prejudice, but united in purpose. "What happens now?" Anya asked quietly, her hand finding his. "Now," Kaelin replied, his voice rich with promise. "We build something new, something worthy of the price you paid to save us all." The sun rose on a transformed Silvergrove, where an Omega had become a queen, and love had conquered the darkness that had nearly destroyed them all. Chapter 8. Silver Dawn. 3 months had passed since the night that changed everything, and Silvergrove territory basked in an unprecedented era of prosperity and peace. The autumn morning painted the forest in brilliant shades of gold and crimson as Anya stood on the keep's highest balcony, watching her pack prepare for the day's activities below. The sight still filled her with wonder. Her pack, finally and truly hers. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the weeks following their mating ceremony, there had been challenges to overcome, wounds to heal that went deeper than flesh and bone. Some pack members had struggled to accept an Omega as their Luna, their minds trapped by generations of rigid hierarchy. Others had embraced the change eagerly, seeing in Anya's rise a promise that their own circumstances need not define their futures. Change had come through action rather than proclamation. When young Samuel, a Delta pup born with a twisted leg, had been scheduled for exile according to ancient law, Anya had intervened. Her healing touch hadn't just mended his bones. It had mended the pack's understanding of what strength truly meant. Samuel now ran with his age mates, his laughter echoing through the training grounds where once only the perfect had been permitted to play. The healing house she'd established in the keep's east wing had become a pilgrimage site for wolves from neighboring territories. Anya treated all who came to her, Alpha and Omega alike, friend and former enemy. Her reputation spread like ripples on still water, carrying whispers of the Luna who could mend not just bodies but broken spirits. Lost in thought again? Kaelin's voice came from behind her, warm with familiar affection. She turned, smiling as he approached with 2 steaming cups of morning tea, a ritual they'd developed. These quiet moments before the demands of leadership consumed their day. He looked magnificent in the golden light, his dark hair catching highlights, his amber eyes bright with contentment she'd never seen in the early days of their courtship. "Thinking about how different everything is," she replied, accepting the offered cup and savoring the blend of herbs Betania had taught her to prepare. "Do you remember when you first brought me here? I was so certain I'd die in that little room, and I was so certain keeping you was a mistake that would cost me everything," Kaelin admitted, settling beside her against the stone railing. "Now I understand it was the first truly right decision I'd made as Alpha King." Below them, the morning training session was beginning. But these weren't the brutal competitions of the old days, designed to establish dominance through pain and humiliation. Under Anya's guidance, they'd developed new methods that built strength through cooperation, teaching young wolves to protect rather than dominate. Marcus, the former captain who had initially opposed Anya's presence, now served as her personal guard. His loyalty, hard-won through months of witnessing her dedication to the pack's well-being, was absolute. He called out instructions to the trainees, his voice carrying the authority of one who had learned that true strength came from lifting others up, rather than keeping them down. "The Northern Territories have requested another audience," Kalen mentioned, his tone carefully neutral. "They want to discuss trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. They're finally ready to acknowledge that our experiment in leadership has been successful." Anya laughed, the sound carrying joy that would have seemed impossible in her days of exile. "An experiment. Is that what we're calling it?" "They're politicians," Kalen said with a shrug. "They need to save face while admitting they were wrong. Let them call it whatever helps them sleep at night." The political ramifications of their union had been far-reaching. Other packs watched Silver Grove carefully, some with hope, others with concern. The rigid caste system that had governed werewolf society for millennia was showing cracks, and not everyone welcomed the change. But results spoke louder than tradition, and Silver Grove's prosperity was undeniable. Food stores were fuller than they'd been in decades, thanks to Anya's knowledge of healing plants and her ability to restore damaged farmland. The pack's population was growing as wolves from struggling territories sought asylum, drawn by stories of a place where worth was measured by heart rather than birth rank. Even the winter preparations, usually a time of anxiety and rationing, proceeded with confidence born of abundance. "There's something else," Kalen said, his voice taking on a different quality, nervous excitement barely contained. "Betania came to see me this morning. She wanted to discuss preparations." Anya set down her teacup, her heart beginning to race as she recognized the particular tone in his voice. "What kind of preparations?" "The kind that involve expanding the royal suite, setting up a nursery, and making sure the pack's best healers are available for consultation." His grin broke free, transforming his features with pure joy. "She says the signs are unmistakable. The way your scent has changed, the glow in your skin, the fact that you've been unconsciously placing protective hands over your stomach for the past week." Anya's breath caught as understanding flooded through her. Her hands moved instinctively to her abdomen, where new life was already beginning to grow. A child. Their child. The ultimate symbol of love transcending all boundaries. "Are you certain?" she whispered, though her body had already begun providing confirmation. The subtle changes she'd attributed to stress and new responsibilities suddenly made perfect sense. "Betania is rarely wrong about such things," Kalen replied, his hand covering hers over the tiny spark of life they'd created together. "How do you feel about the idea of little princes and princesses running through these halls?" "Terrified," Anya admitted, then smiled through sudden tears of overwhelming emotion. "And more excited than I've ever been in my life." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their pack prepare for another day in their transformed world. Children played in gardens where once only formal ceremonies had been permitted. Elderly pack members, no longer discarded when their physical strength waned, shared stories and wisdom with eager young listeners. Healers worked alongside warriors, and artisans were valued as highly as hunters. "I have something to show you," Anya said suddenly, taking Kalen's hand and leading him back into the keep. They descended to the great hall, where workers were putting finishing touches on a massive tapestry that had been commissioned to commemorate the night everything changed. The woven image showed wolves of all ranks standing together beneath a full moon, their faces turned toward a pair of figures at the center, an alpha king and his Luna, hands joined, silver light flowing between them. But it was the bottom of the tapestry that drew Kalen's attention. There, woven in threads of gold and silver, were words that would serve as Silver Grove's new motto: "Love conquers all boundaries, transcends all laws, transforms all hearts." The old tapestries told stories of dominance and fear, Anya explained. "I wanted this one to tell a different story. One our children will grow up seeing, understanding that their worth isn't determined by their birth rank, but by the size of their hearts and the strength of their character." Kalen pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist as he pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. "Our children will be extraordinary," he murmured, "with your compassion and healing gifts, and hopefully some of my strategic mind, and your stubbornness," Anya teased. leaning back against his chest. "Don't forget your legendary stubbornness. Only when fighting for what matters most," he protested, then grew serious. "Speaking of which, are you prepared for the challenges ahead? Pregnancy will make you more vulnerable, and there are still those who question your place here. Let them question," Anya replied with quiet confidence. "I've survived exile, illness, assassination attempts, and political upheaval. I think I can handle a few disapproving looks from traditionalists who can't accept that the world is changing." As if summoned by their conversation, a commotion arose in the courtyard. Through the tall windows, they could see a delegation arriving, wolves bearing the colors of the Eastern Territories, their banners flying proudly in the morning breeze. But unlike the hostile envoys of months past, these visitors came bearing gifts rather than ultimatums. "They want to discuss marriage alliances," Kaylin observed, recognizing the diplomatic protocols, "seeking matches between their young alphas and our pack members. The highest compliment they could pay to our new way of life, and we'll consider their proposals based on compatibility and mutual affection rather than political advantage," Anya said firmly. "Love matches only, no forced unions to cement treaties." "Naturally," Kaylin agreed, "though I suspect you'll want to personally evaluate every potential suitor to ensure they're worthy of our pack members." "Obviously," Anya laughed. "I didn't fight this hard to build a better world just to let our people settle for less than they deserve." The day proceeded with the familiar rhythm of leadership. Meetings with advisors, decisions about resource allocation, settling disputes between pack members, and planning for the future. But through it all, Anya carried the secret knowledge of the life growing within her, a reminder that their story was far from over. Evening found them back on the balcony where the day had begun, watching the sun set over their transformed territory. In the distance, wolves ran through the forest, not in formation or competition, but in pure joy, their howls of happiness echoing across the land. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that night?" Kaylin asked, his arm around Anya's shoulders as they watched their pack settle into peaceful rest. "No," Anya replied without hesitation, "because you did find me, and everything else follows from that moment. We don't get to rewrite the past, only build a better future." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, she placed her hand over the tiny life growing within her and felt the future spreading out before them like a silver road, leading toward infinite possibilities. Their children would know a world where love mattered more than rank, where healing was valued above harming, where every wolf could aspire to greatness regardless of the circumstances of their birth. The Alpha King and his Luna stood together as night claimed Silvergrove, their love a beacon of hope for all who had been forgotten, abandoned, or told they weren't worthy of their dreams. And in the keep's east wing, a new tapestry was being woven, one that would tell the story of the children who would grow up in a world where everyone, regardless of rank or origin, could find their happily ever after. Anya and Kaylin's love story proves that even the most broken souls can find their destiny. Across the werewolf territories, other rejected omegas and lonely alphas are still searching for their fated mates, fighting battles that seem impossible to win. Their stories of hope and transformation are waiting to be told. If this tale of healing and love touched your heart, we have countless other passionate werewolf romances ready for you. Stories where love conquers hierarchy, where the forgotten become queens, and where true mates find each other against all odds. Hit that subscribe button and join our supernatural family. Until the next full moon brings us together again, remember, everyone deserves their happily ever after, no matter how dark their beginning.